Much appreciated, much appreciated. Well, here we go. We're rounding up the day 2 of AWS, right? How's it been for everybody? Pretty good so far? All right, that's a good thing, that's a good thing. Well, I really do appreciate your time today. I realize we're getting near sort of that end of the day, and so hopefully I can just infuse you with a little bit of energy before we kind of go and kind of do things for our evening. But, you know, once again, I really wanted to thank you for being here, and I'd just like to take a few minutes. Now, in no way can this be an exhaustive chat, right? We've got about 20 minutes together, but I really wanted to talk to you about a concept that's really new for us in our industry, and we're talking about security at the point of the data. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means. We'll talk a little bit about some of the new threats that we're seeing, what those new threats mean to us, and what we can do to really make sure we take a step ahead. So we'll talk about some best practices that we want to make sure you all know about what these threat actors are doing and what they're after. You know, before we do that, before we dive right on in, I have one question. This will be one of those, the actual silent question to kind of think about here, but what is a company's most important asset? Is it staff? Is it money, funds? Is it data? Or is it your time? So kind of think about that, log it away. Well, let me give you the answer. It's absolutely data. Data is the #1 thing that can proliferate a company or take a company down today. And that's just the exact idea that we're talking about when we're talking about these new forms of threat. These new threat actors, they're only here for one thing. And it's actually not your data. It's your money. And they know it's a quick way. I think the last article that I read, the total addressable market is over $6 billion. And they know it's quick and they know it's easy. So when we talk to our customers, at Rubrik we have over 4,000 customers, and we talk to our customers, we really hear 3 things resoundingly from them. One thing is my cloud data at risk? Do I know that I am able to recover? Do I know that my data is safe? And the other thing would be, are my workloads unprotected? Gone are the days where we want to create a job for every piece of a backup or a piece of data that we want to save. To me, those are table stakes. You need to be able to back up efficiently. You need to be able to recover. But data management is much, much more than that. And we hear that from them consistently. But number one thing that we hear today, and I think we all understand this, is how can I make sure that my data is safe from unauthorized access, from unauthorized users, from threat actors wanting to take me down? In fact, what we've seen is the solutions that we've used up till this point, and I've been in this particular industry for quite some time, the solutions that we use have up till this point are not going to get us to where we need to go with the new threats today. Essentially, yesterday's technology can't answer today's needs. And I like to throw this graphic up because it really shows more than just our industry, about how we have to move forward, about how we have to think about answering the needs of today. If we think about transportation and where that started, ships, right? The trades, you know, with all the trade winds and everything, moving right on to locomotives and moving right on to airplanes and spaceships. And obviously, we're entering the electrification era. What we need from our transportation is very different from what we needed a long time ago. We can look at some other industries as well. The communications and media is probably the perfect example here. Does anybody in here remember the original cable thing? It was hooked up to your TV and you had a twist or you had a button. All right, I'm probably aging myself here, but the point is I remember that stuff, and it was huge, and you can turn it and you can sit on the couch and you can. Now look at where we're getting our media from. The Instagram, the Twitters, the Facebooks. The point is how we consume our media today, what we expect, the transparency we expect, is just very different than what we had in years past. When we talk about our industry, when we talk about what we do here, when we talk about the ability to make sure that your data has integrity, when we look at hospitals that are trying to cure cancer, when you look at mom and pop shops that are trying to target the right user, it doesn't matter. You need to make sure that your data has a set of values that you need it to have. You need to be able to trust your data, that your data doesn't have something hiding in it. I love this quote up here. This is Paul Vixie. Paul Vixie is the creator of DNS. And he said just last July, everything is broken. Now, what he was talking about is the way we transmit data, and we'll get to a little bit to that in a second here. But the point is that everything is broken, and ransomware is breaking everything. You know, when we think of ransomware, we hear this term so much. Quite succinctly, what is ransomware? Well, ransomware is when somebody comes in, owns you, as we like to call it in the industry, and they do a mass delete, or they do a mass encryption. And they're only doing it, they only infected you with that malware so that they can get the money. They just want to turn and run. They don't want the data necessarily, they want the money. So we have to think about that. And when do ransomware attacks happen? We have seen across the entire set of attacks that go on really worldwide that there's a technical maintenance behind schedule. Maybe there's a patch that you weren't able to do or didn't do. You have an employee that clicked on something that they probably shouldn't have. And just to let everybody know, there's no free trip. There's just, don't click on it. But it happens. Or you think that there's a Facebook post that you have to click on and you let something in. But the third and most important thing is you just accidentally didn't prepare. Your security practices really weren't up to par with this new type of threat. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, to make sure that we are ahead of these threat actors. You know, certainly when we see an actual ransomware event, we already know we should have been prepared for it. We should have had a list of things in place that we're going to talk about. But at that time, it's almost too late. I mean, the very first step is the infiltration. It's the access. And this is not a scare attack. This is just what we've gleaned from being in the data security business. So they infiltrate the access, but I'd like to point something out here. They're sitting there. They're waiting. By the time they get to the second step, the event, the issue, when they're taking down the IP phones, they're taking down your email, they're isolating you, what they've already done is they've already been in your environment for 5 or 6 months. So gone are the days where you can say, hey, I have a legacy backup solution, or I'm just going to do a restore. That malware has been in there and infected all of those backups for all of those months. So when that third piece comes, the isolation, what I'd like to say most here, certainly from what we've witnessed, is there's that sense of alacrity. Right? They want to get that done fast. I need this $10 million today, and I've been watching all of your transactions for the last 5 to 6 months. I know exactly how much your income is. I know exactly how much your outgo is. I know exactly how much you have in the bank. So I don't want to hear anything about you need 24 hours. As a matter of fact, did you just cuss at me? This is true stuff. You now have 12 hours. The point here is that once you get to the event itself, you really is no time to think. You really need to make sure that you're thinking about the types of these new types of threat actors and these new types of issues that we have to prepare for. I mean, it doesn't really get any better post-ransomware event. I mean, if you're lucky, you can maybe recover from some backups. You probably just don't know if these new backups contain some of that malware. It's an issue that we'll touch on here in a minute. But if you have to scrap everything and reorder everything, we're talking millions, and not just in downtime, actually millions of dollars spent simply because this ransomware event, actually took it down. You know, there are a couple of partners that we work very closely with. Some of them are really specialized in helping people through these sort of mediation courses. And once it gets to this point, the rebuild, the restore, this is what costs companies the most. And most of the time, it's because they didn't know what data was touched. So these things are very important to be able to understand where your data is, know what data you have, and to make sure your data has the integrity that it needs. You know, I speak, at a lot of these types of events. My most favorite types of events are the CIO and CISO roundtables, where we really kind of talk about what's going on in our industries, what some of our worries are, and what we can do to really prepare ourselves. But if there's one thing that's been absolutely clear, is that no one is safe. Once again, this is really just a best practices discussion to let everybody know that the threat actors just want your money. They don't care what vertical, they don't care what industry you're in. They just want that money. And so what can you do? What can you do when even the most popular companies are saying it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when?
On Friday evening, the city of Durham's data networks experienced a serious cyber malware attack.
Go up a little bit on
which
that.
affected
Volume,
our entire
please.
network.
Ransomware attacks are testing the resolve of cities across
New Orleans
America.
city government has been hit.
Four
with a
U.S.
cyber
cities have been
attack.
attacked by ransomware.
Recent cyber attack has hit U.S. health agencies.
The city can be assured that our backups are very good because they're immutable, which means that ransomware cannot consume our backups. We're using a product called Rubik.
Immutability. Immutability. Can't change it, can't append it. There are only certain pieces or solutions in the industry which really can really tout the idea that they're fully immutable. But there's a larger thing that we have to discuss just here for a couple of minutes, and that's the idea of zero trust data security. See, when we talk about data security, we talk about security at the point of the data. Think about your house. We have locks. We have security systems. But at the same time, you don't leave your most prized possessions sitting on the kitchen table. You make sure that they're taken care of, that they're locked away. Zero trust in some ways is obviously not a new concept. We've always thought about zero trust in a north to south pattern. You know, we think about firewalls, edge protection, intrusion detection or penetration devices. We think about saving or keeping the data from getting in. As a matter of fact, a long time ago, it was really all about the trusted environment, right? Ben signed in and Ben was able to get to anything he needed to in the network. Well, now today, we must assume that the bad guy is already in, that they're already within the infrastructure. And so we can't really trust the way we can. And so we have to look at each and every bit of our authentication to make sure that we're making sure that's not a threat actor, that that person has used the proper forms of authentication, like multi-factor, to make sure they are who they are. So essentially, it's the principle of extending the least privilege to everyone and verifying everything. Why do we need to do this? It seems like a whole bunch of extra work. Essentially, it's because the bad guys are still getting through. That whole house scenario we talked about, unfortunately, we still see break-ins. That's why we don't leave our most prized possessions sitting on the kitchen counter. And so that's why we have to talk today about data at the security at the point of the data. 5 to 10 years ago, this really wasn't a discussion. It was more about, do you have a good backup? Do you have a good restore? Can we do it quickly? But today, it's a little bit different. You know, when you walk through typical reasons as to why they're paying ransoms, well, one, you don't have good backups. They locked down your data. They encrypted your stuff. You didn't even know an event was coming on. So you have to pay the ransom. You know, the second of those options is you attempt to recover. But you have a whole bunch of questions, and this piece is key. You have an IT ops team, and you have a SecOps team. Before, in the past, they worked as two separate teams, but in this case, you have the IT ops team that's restoring the actual infrastructure, and you have the SecOps team, which now has to figure out what was touched, what data did they get, how much is this going to cost us? Well, in the past, they really weren't working together, and that's a huge problem when time is against your side. Remember, that sense of alacrity is everything. They just want to hurry up, get paid, and get the heck out of there. So the point is that, is your data protected? If you can't answer that, you're paying the ransom. Can ransomware be investigated? Do you know when they got in? Do you know what they touched? Do you know where they are? If not, you're paying the ransom. Can your sensitive data be discovered? This is a huge one. Do you have a solution that can tell you where your PII is, your personal information, social security numbers, credit card numbers, house numbers? If not, you're paying the ransom. Can incidents be contained? Can you recover quickly? All of these things lead to pay the ransom. I'm here to talk to you today because they're already working against us, and we just need to make sure that we're staying a step ahead. How do you stay a step ahead? Well, we have 5 pillars that we like to rely on when thinking about what you should do with your infrastructure. First is obviously make sure you have a backup, a copy, another layer of protection of your data off of a different subsystem, right? You don't want it having on just the one subsystem. But that's just not enough anymore, right? They go in through shares, or they go in through Linux proxies, or they go in through Windows, and they still own your stuff. So you need to make sure you have something that has a logical air-gap architecture to make sure that something has native data immutability, native, not removed a super user account. Not went in there and changed the hash mark so you kind of can't see it. No, native immutability that cannot be appended to. And of course, multi-factor authentication. I kind of feel like those are table stakes today. But that's what it lets you recover from a major event that we're talking about. That's being one step ahead of the bad guys, of those threat actors. Ransomware investigation. We're actually able to, there we go. Ransomware investigation. You want to be able to detect those anomalies. Are you at home and there's an encryption event that starts to kick off? Don't you want to know that before they encrypt all of your data? Don't you want to know the scope of impact, where they got, what they touched? These are some of the things that we can help you think about or conceptualize when you're thinking about staying a step ahead. These are all things being in cybersecurity that we need to care about today. And this is what's different than 5 years ago when talking about the secondary set of data. We talked a little bit about sensitive data discovery. So actually going through your environment and automatically finding where that PII is so that you can move it to a place that's advantageous for you. If we know that it's, somewhere on a certain type of place, in a certain type of corner, and we know that that's where all of our PII is, and then we can tell where the blast radius or the people came into, we can now recover in a good way. So you assess the risk of exfiltration, which is huge for the IT SecOps side. Many a times, they take months trying to figure out what data has left. And by the way, part of the threat becomes, well, if you don't pay me, I'm just going to sell off the data that I took. So this is really, really important to make sure you have that. When you talk about incident containment, I read recently in an article, up to 80% of the restores that happen from some of these legacy solutions actually inject the malware right back in to the environment. And I mean, it makes sense. Those malware strings are hidden down in those in the backups. When you restore the backups, you're just putting the malware right back in and letting the guys right back in through that same door. So you really want to have an application that integrates with workflows. And these are the types of things that we all need to think about as a best practice today. And at the very end, you have to be able to recover. We have to be able to put it back. We have to be able to do these things because we want to give the bad guys the finger. So the point is that you want to have those simple recovery workflows. We want to be able to restore in minutes, but we want to make sure that our data has integrity with it too. So with these types of things, you're able to answer these questions that we talked about. Is my data protected? Absolutely, yes, it is. Using a solution that uses SLA domains, you never really have to worry about setting up a backup job. That's so 6 or 7 years ago. We want to make sure we have all that data and that data can be brought back. But we also investigate that ransomware. You want to make sure your team is able to see right when an event began. You want to make sure that that sensitive data, you know where it is and you have it locked away in its proper place. And then, of course, to be able to recover quickly. Well, that is the name of the game. That is the name of the game. And you can see here, this was a big point that I brought up earlier. The IT ops team and the SecOps team, they're working together because we now have a solution that allows them to work collaboratively and not just against each other. We need to bring this back fast. We need to make sure it's safe. These two are now blended. So we talked a little bit about threat hunting a little bit before. This is something that's really new. New not only to this part of the industry and the secondary data, but something new that we really need to start thinking about as well. Just really quick for everybody in here, the threat hunting we're speaking of is the ability to go through all of your secondary data, whether online or offline, and be able to tell whether there is malware in it, whether there is able to tell whether there is a malware string that still lies in there that can be brought back from dormant. Why do we do this? Actually, the absolute best way to thwart this sort of a threat is reverse engineering, is to actually take the string and decompose it, figure out what strings are the malware part or what part make the calls. But those are very time intensive and very, very expensive. So our industry, the cybersecurity industry, adopted the use of YARA rules. And YARA rules are simply just a set of rules. It needs just several things. But you're able to put in strings. You're able to look at files. You're able to denote what those things are. So never before have we had the opportunity to be able to take these types of YARA rules, files, hash sets, and place them against your offline backups. And why do we need to do this? Which point should you recover to? This is a huge one we're talking about. Once again, 80%, they put the malware right back in. It's simply because we just didn't have insight into that before. What servers did they have control of? When did they first get here? How do we scan for the attacker? These are the types of questions that really the industry has started to ask and that we need to have answers for if we're going to make sure our infrastructures are clean and are able to be restored. And so what we're talking about here is the ability to have that. It's the ability to have that YARA engine. Remember, you want to be able to also put in files or paths. Sometimes the YARA rules, they have sort of a if then, if this. You have to have a condition, right? And then it kind of just runs through and looks for those things. But sometimes you just want to be able to look directly at file sets. So whatever you're looking at, make sure you have the flexibility to do that on your secondary set of data. So with that, you can determine the timeline of impacted servers. You can make sure that you recover one time. And once again, you make sure that your data has the integrity that you absolutely need there. So just a quick shift, and we're talking about these types of rule sets, and we're talking about the idea that we've never seen a secondary set of data treated like this. We've never had a time before this where we have to make sure that our secondary set of data is secure. Before it was just good enough just to have a backup. But we also want to provide the easiest way to break this information down. And so we do integrate with Palo Alto's XSOAR. As a matter of fact, Palo Alto is a great customer of ours. And they're also one of the first ones that even though they're in that business, they will also say it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. What we're able to do here is think about those 5 pillars that I just talked to you before. We're able to easily and efficiently fold those in to alerts that run their workbooks on the SIEM side. If you're an XSOAR user and you're in this room, you know what that brings. There is no other secondary data that has the ability to be brought in today the way that this is able to be brought in to an easy SOAR dashboard. And once again, you can implement workbooks very easily from there to do that granular recovery at scale at a moment's notice as you need it. And remember, we keep this easy. That is available in the marketplace. It breaks down those silos. It lets the IT ops team and the SecOps team share information at scale. It allows them to sort of break down what they were sort of fighting each other with and actually come together to figure out what's best for the company. And so we're using that same machine learning behavior to look for those types of things. We're going to automatically assess that scope impact. We're going to look at scales to what some of those things are. And remember, we're going to make sure that that data is protected with the integrity that you expect, and to be able to forward that directly into a play or a workbook. One of the last things I wanted to talk to you about something here is almost something we would consider basic, but it still wraps around us with the idea of data security. And that's just the idea of talking about our archived data. We have all this data. The data isn't going away. Whether it's a litigation hold, legal hold, maybe it's one of the policies of the company for historical employee data or customer data. a lot of these questions we have to ask ourselves. How do I make sure my data is secure? How do I make sure that my unstructured data is all in one place and I can get to it? How do I even know what data I have? These are some of the questions that we can answer. I mean, the challenge of backup capacity is quite simply this. It never stops growing. You can schedule it to go off-site. You can maybe buy a whole bunch of NFS servers, perhaps, and obviously cluster them down bottom. Of course, when you're looking at a solution like a Rubrik, it would just mean you procure more of it, buy it, more of it. But we're not going to talk about buying more of something. Let's talk about being efficient. And the idea, instead of storing all of that data and pushing it somewhere, what if you could just keep the metadata, the data of that data, the information on that data, and pass that data directly through to an S3 bucket? Wouldn't that be awesome? That's what we're able to do with AWS. So, and I think they're up to 200, what is it? 200 trillion objects. I don't know how many zeros that is. It's a whole lot of zeros. The idea is they can handle that ingest. One of the questions we get from our customers when we talk about something like this is, hold on. You just bragged to me so long about this immutable. Nobody can touch it. Nobody can append it. Nobody can get to it. And it's a problem, right? Well, just know that if you're using an S3 bucket, those data protections append on the archive target. So not everything is created the same. In this situation, we can offer the exact same immutability because of how we are intertwined and how we work with AWS. If you want to know anything more about this, definitely catch us and we can tell you some more about that. And you know, AWS has a comprehensive view on security itself. They enable the audit tracking. They also have MFA. These are standards. These are things you have to have in an enterprise class product. And AWS absolutely does have that. Those immutable backups that enable across count backups, absolutely. And this is why we work so well with AWS. This is why we're partnered so closely with AWS. The one thing I would like to remind you, though, and remind everybody in this room, is that the cloud is still a shared responsibility model. It is up to AWS to make sure their cloud is working, and they do. It is up to us to make sure that our data has the integrity that we need it to have and that it is where it needs to be, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You know, I know I've taken some time here today, and I've really appreciated your patience and actually joining me at the end of the day today. This needs to be a carry-on conversation. I love this stuff. I speak with a lot of passion because I've been here a while. And one of the reasons I like talking about these types of solutions, because they're solutions that keep the bad guys away, the threat actors out. So no matter where you go, no matter what you use, make sure you're using something that absolutely offers a warranty at the end of it there. I mean, I'm talking about you make sure you use a solution that is so sure that your data will have the set of integrity that it needs to have, that they will offer a warranty against that. Now, once again, we talked here a lot about best practices today. These are what these threat actors are talking about. Like I said, I get to sit at a lot of these round tables and figure out how SLED partners push together and how different 911s interact. And so I hope you've taken something away from these conversations, and I'll certainly be around for any questions that come up after, but I'd really like to thank you for your time. Have a great day.